Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 26 of my Pro Tools video tutorial series. In this episode, I'm going to go over an introduction to MIDI, how to use instrument tracks, what instrument tracks are, what virtual instruments or software instruments are, how to record basic MIDI music, and also quantize the playback of MIDI music. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And it's essentially a computer language that was commercially made available in 1983. And it's a computer language that allows musical devices to communicate to each other. So back in the early days of MIDI, this was used to make hardware devices communicate with each other. So you could have two synthesizers chained together, and you could play the notes on one, but hear the sound out of the other one. Nowadays, we mainly use MIDI in the software world. We use it via a MIDI keyboard or MIDI controller of some kind to input MIDI events into our DAW so that software instruments within the DAW can create sound. So what we're going to do is we are going to work with a new type of track today called an instrument track. Now, there's also a MIDI track. The difference between MIDI tracks and instrument tracks is that MIDI tracks can input MIDI and output MIDI data. They can't actually make any sound on their own, so they're more used for MIDI routing to route a MIDI signal somewhere. An instrument track can input a MIDI signal and output an audio signal, so we can actually put a virtual instrument right on the instrument track. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to create 3 of those, and we're also going to create a master fader just so we can sort of monitor our master output. So we've got our 3 instrument tracks here. I'm also going to create a click track so we can stay in time as we play. Today I am using a MIDI controller. I'm using an Ovation Impulse 49 MIDI controller to play everything in. To do things like this in real time, yes, you need a MIDI controller to do so. If you want to type notes in one by one, you can do that, but we'll go over that in another episode. All right, the basic musical example I want to build today, I want piano, I want some synth strings or a synth pad, and some drums and a bass. So this top track, I'm going to call it piano. The second one I'm going to call a pad. And the bottom I'm going to call drum and bass, because it's actually going to be together, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So let's load up our first virtual instrument. The way you do this in Pro Tools is you go to your Inserts tabs. If you don't see those, you can hide and show them here just by right-clicking. I'm going to go to Multi-Channel Plugin, Instrument, and you'll see a list of all the virtual instruments you have in Pro Tools. Now, I have a few more than you probably are seeing, maybe a few less. The ones that actually come with Pro Tools are Boom, it's a drum machine, DB33, it's an organ, Mini Grand, which is a sample-based grand piano, Structure, it's a free sampler, Vacuum, which is a sort of retro monophonic synth, and then Expand 2, which is sort of Pro Tools flagship sample-based synthesizer. For this track, we're going to use Mini Grand. And we're going to wait for it to load. There we go. Once the plugin loads, we should be able to arm the track for recording right here and play in on our MIDI controller. So we have sound. I want to choose something a little bit more ambient than that. So I'm going to go up to the preset menu here. I'm going to choose this one called Deep Blue Sea. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, I like that. Very ambient. All right, so we got our first instrument. Next, let's find our synth pad. For this track, we're going to use the Expand instrument. So again, multi-channel plugin, instrument, and then we're going to choose Expand 2. For all of the virtual instruments in Pro Tools, you're going to choose the preset, and really any plugin in Pro Tools, you're going to choose the preset from up here. We will eventually go over, how to use each individual instrument and customize the controls and the settings. But for now, we're just going to use the presets from the preset bank. This we're going to use the Huge Pad folder, and this has a ton of presets in it. And we're going to use the one called Magic Carpet. Let's see what that sounds like. Cool, I'm going to use that, but I'm just going to pull the volume down just a touch. And then the last instrument is going to be an expand instrument. And one of the useful things about expand is there are a lot of arpeggiated settings, as well as loops built right in. Where's the loop? Here's the loop folder. The setting we're going to use is under multi-track arpeggios, and it's called One Man Electro Band. So this is especially helpful if you're kind of new to this, because there are loop-based and rhythm-based presets in Expand that essentially let you just hold the key down and it does a lot of the work for you. So we're going to use that one as well. All right. So let's go ahead and try to record this. I'm going to start with the drum and bass. I'm just going to hit 3 to record. Since I have a click track, we should hear the click. I'm going to jump in on measure 2 and not in measure 1. And one thing I am going to do real quick is I'm going to change the tempo from 120 to 128. There we go. All right, so now let's open up our MIDI clip. One thing you'll notice is the MIDI clip is very different than an audio clip because you're not seeing a waveform, you're just seeing each individual MIDI event that we triggered. So let's just double click on this, open it up. What this does is it opens it up in a separate MIDI editor window. And one thing you'll notice is that the MIDI editor has its own set of tools, just like the main edit window, has its own grid values, just like the edit window as well. So what we're going to do with these notes is we're going to quantize them to the grid so that they're perfectly on the grid. Now, one of the things, let me just change the grid up here to a quarter note. There we go. One of the things that's normally on by default that I turned off just a moment ago is this option right here. This is your MIDI output. If this is highlighted in green, when you click on a note or drag over a note, it's actually going to play that note. So it can get kind of annoying when you're trying to edit notes. So I generally turn that off when I'm trying to do editing. So let me drag over all these notes. To quantize these to the grid, or basically correct them so that they're perfectly in time with the grid, what you're going to do is you're going to go to Event Operations, Quantize, or you can use the key command Option 0. Now, since these are just whole notes, I just played whole notes on the grid, I'm going to choose whole note, one note, or whole note, as my quantize grid. Now, if I do that and I hit apply, and let me just do one little thing here just so you can maybe see this a little bit better once I do it. I'm going to shorten this note a bit. I'm going to hit apply. I wasn't too far off, but if I hit apply, you'll see that the notes snap exactly to the front end of the grid at whole notes. What doesn't happen is the back end of the notes don't snap to the grid. So there's another option in here. If you click note off, it'll actually snap the front end and back end of the note to the quantized grid that you choose. So if I hit apply now, that little gap I made there has been filled in, which is what we want. So let's just listen to that real quick and make sure everything's perfectly on time. Cool. The other thing we can do now is we can also use our selector tool and we can trim up the MIDI clip just like an audio waveform. Double click on it and hit Command D a few times to repeat it. All right, let's move to our pad instrument. I'm just going to play some chords right on top of this, following the same chord progression. Just like that. Let's pull the volume on that down a bit. Using our grabber tool, double click on it. Again, we're going to quantize this to the grid, so I'm going to use my Option 0 key command this time. This is also whole notes, and you can see there's some pretty big gaps in between the notes. So I'm going to leave that note on quantize on. Hit apply, and there we go. Simple enough. All right, so now we're going to do, let's duplicate this as well. Command D, or Command D a few times. There we go. So we're going to play a little piano melody on top of this. I'm going to transpose my keyboard up an octave here. I'll try to come up with something pretty. All right, so let's just take a look at that piano by itself. The rhythm here is a little more complex than just whole notes like we had before. Right now I have my grid set to a quarter note, so the grid lines are showing quarter notes. Let's take a listen to this. Now, the general rule about quantizing is that you want to quantize not necessarily to the shortest value, but to the quickest value. So right now, all of these seem like they want to line up with a quarter note on the grid. So I'm going to hit Option 0, change our quantized grid to a quarter note, and hit apply. And this should be perfectly in time now. And just looking at it, I can tell from here all the way up to here, we still have a quarter note grid. So let's quantize all that. Now it gets a little different right here. And one way to sort of figure out what value you need to quantize to is to slowly make your grid smaller. So let's go to an eighth note. Well, I can tell that these are eighth notes, but these are not. These are faster than eighth notes. So let's go to 16th note. Now, sometimes what'll happen, like here, is I played this note a little bit too early. So actually, all these notes are quite a bit too early. So if I quantize these, they're probably not going to get quantized properly. So what I'm going to do is use my grabber tool, select all these, just pull them over. There we go. Just manually quantize them to the grid, because that's really what I intended to play. And then let's drag over all this, and I'm going to quantize to the fastest value, not the shortest value, which is a 16th note. Well, it just so happens that the fastest value happens to also be the shortest value here. Obviously, I either moved that note or I played something wrong there. So a couple things we can do to edit up this note here. I meant to go here on E, or F rather. I'm going to use the trim tool up here to trim up the end of this one and also extend the range of that one. So let's try that. There we go. So now we've got that little idea the way we want it. Let's trim it up to the grid, just like with everything else, and duplicate it. All right, one last thing I want to do with the piano is I actually want to double it. So I'm going to double it up an octave. So I'm going to right-click on the piano track and choose duplicate. Hit OK. One of the tricky things about MIDI and Pro Tools is that if I edit one of these clips, it's actually going to edit all of them, because they see how they all have the same name, piano 1, piano 1, piano 1. They're all recognized as the same clip. So if I edit this one, all the other 3 are going to be edited. So what I want is I want one track to be up an octave, one track to be in the original octave. So I'm going to call this track piano up octave. And what I'm going to do to create a new MIDI clip, a new unique MIDI clip, is I'm going to select these and then press Shift Option 3 to consolidate. So now the clip actually has a different name and it's a unique clip. All right, so I'm going to double click on this. And with everything selected, I'm going to show you another event operation function. This one is called transpose. And the transpose key command is Option T. What you can do with the transpose menu is you can transpose your MIDI notes up by any number of octaves or semitones. I'm going to say transpose up 1 octave, and everything will jump up an octave. So now I should have 2 distinct tones, one lower and one higher in the piano. And I'm also, just to give them some separation, I'm going to pan the one that's down an octave a little bit more to the left, and this one a little bit more to the right. There we go. All right, let's cut the click track, and let's see what this sounds like with all of our instruments in there. There you go. What I just did there is I was just playing with the volume in the mixer, but another thing I did was the expand is actually a multi-channel or multi-timbral instrument. I just pulled down the bass sound within expand just to pull that down a bit and hear the drums a little bit better. All right, so just like with an audio session, you can select everything that you want to export or bounce. You go up to File, bounce to disk, and it will bounce the whole thing out as a WAV file, and you can listen to it as a WAV file, or you can add a copy of, say, like an MP3 or something like that. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to support the channel, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to take that support a step further, I'm now on Patreon. That's patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy. I'm using Patreon as a way to try to raise funds to improve the channel, put out more content more regularly, upgrade some gear. I'm trying to move all of my videos to 1080p format. I'm also trying to get some sort of video camera, 4K or 1080p video camera, so I can do some more live action stuff, as well as getting a new desk and some new gear to record with. So if you feel inclined, please go to patreon.com/MusicTechHelpGuy and make a contribution. So once again, thanks for the support and thanks for watching.